Hundreds of thousands of researchers around the world are working to improve life and address imminent threats to humanity. Often their research ends up in the scientific valley of death in the form of publications and patents that never see the light of day. That is about to change. Welcome to the Lab to Startup podcast, hosted by Naresh Sunkara, founder and executive director of the Berkeley Postdoc Entrepreneurship Program at the University of California, Berkeley. This show has two main goals: share the stories of those who have successfully founded startups based on their own research, and highlight resources needed to help those aspiring to launch startups in the deep tech space. Whether it's electric cars, vaccines, addressing climate change concerns, or possibly establishing life on other planets, Naresh and his esteemed guests want to help scientists, engineers, faculty, and researchers bring their innovations to market. Learn more and subscribe today at labtostartup.com. And now, here's Naresh.
My guest today is Kenichi Nogami, the co-founder and CEO of Metcela, a clinical stage biotechnology startup pioneering the research and development of fibroblast and stem cell-based therapy for chronic heart diseases that currently have limited therapeutic options. In this episode of Lab to Startup, we talk about the current treatments for heart failure and how the fibroblast technology could help this space. We then explore the founding story, setting smaller milestones and fundraising to meet those goals, the role of recruiting firms in hiring in Japan, building a flat structure at the startup as opposed to a hierarchical system that Japan is generally known for, and how Ken's investment banking experience helped with acquisition of another biotech startup, and many other stories. I was introduced to Ken by a mutual friend, Caleb Bell, who was previously on my show. It was fun to learn about this super promising Japanese startup. A big learning to me was around the fundraising differences and the benefits and challenges that come with it. I truly believe you'll find this very useful as well. Ken, you are actually the first founder from Japan that I'm having on the show. And I've been looking forward to learning about your journey at Metcela and broadly about the Japanese biotech startup ecosystem.
Yeah, honor to be here. And thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited about talking about stories and our stories and how we started and where we are standing here. Metcela was founded in 2016 in Tokyo, Japan. The company is about the fibroblast technology, which is a special subpopulation fibroblast positive to the BCAM1 or CD106 proteins. And the fibroblast has a regenerative capacity to the heart. And we are working on adult cardiac heart failure with treatment with this fibroblast. The fibroblast has the cardiomyocyte proliferation capacity and lymph angiogenesis capacity, which is promoting the lymphatic vessel regeneration and heart tissue regenerations. In addition to this pipeline, we are also working on the phase 3 pipeline of pediatric single ventricle with cardiac stem cells, which we acquired last year. And this is also amazing technology. Went through phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, and now we are right before starting the phase 3.
And I think it'll be helpful to provide some context by talking about how they currently treat heart failure, so there is an appreciation for the fibroblast technology that you are developing at Metcela.
Yeah, apparently the heart failure is progressive disease and no treatment can reverse the progression. Currently, the patients are treated with the medication, which reduces the blood pressure and the heart pressure, and then making it possible to use the existing tissues, heart, muscles a bit longer than originally expected. And the ultimate treatment, only treatment right now is the heart transplant, but apparently there's lack of the supply, the donor, and then the patients have limited opportunities to get the heart transplant. So that is why the other types of the therapy, which may reverse the progression, is needed.
This is fascinating. I know how complicated heart failures can be, and the technologies like the one you're developing at Metcela are going to be game changers. Maybe this is a good place to talk about the founding story. How did you and your co-founder Takahiro meet?
We're almost the same age, 1 year difference. And I met him in 2013, maybe the end of 2013, by introduction from my friend who also had an entrepreneurial experience. And the person knew my entrepreneurial aspirations. That was how we connected each other. Then the time he was still a PhD student, aspiring to make his finding to become actual treatment, but he didn't know how we can get there. And we didn't even have in vivo studies. The Japanese younger researchers having limited access to the research budgets.
And infrastructure. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Infrastructure as well. So he sought to continue his study with the external funding opportunities, which is apparently the startup. And we started to pitch in 2014 regarding the fibroblast technology, but it was not easy because many researchers may think the fibroblast is a bad guy. In many cases, the scar tissue and the fibrosis is also activated by the fibroblast cells. So we had a hard time getting kind of negative feedbacks, but some people opened their mind and listened to our story, and they agreed that the scientific evidence in the treatment. And then we could progress to the grant submission in 2015. We continued the preparation of almost 1 year, including pitching to the VCs and the grant applications, but we ended up getting one positive venture capital and application to the grant. And the grant was accepted. We got $500,000 from the government and some fraction of the venture capital money.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So
that's how it started. Yeah.
Yes. So your co-founder Takahiro, basically a PhD student, and he had this discovery about fibroblasts and he wanted to start a company and he didn't really know how. And through a mutual connection, you both met. What were you doing at that point? And what is your background?
Oh, sure. So I was investment banker having really strong technological aspirations. I supported tech companies doing merger and acquisitions and financings at Morgan Stanley in Japan. When I was a student, because I had a startup mindset, interned at some venture creation programs, but I ended up realized I should have some professional education for some years to make up myself more useful resource in the startup. So I did 6.5 years investment banking experience, then joined the Metcela preparation. But during the Metcela preparation, I was actually at UCLA as well for my master's degree at the business school. At UCLA, I brought Metcela's business story and tried to have the team of creating business models, business ideas. And with the classroom experience, I mean, we created a pitch book and business plan deck in a class with the team. I could engage the venture capital. So UCLA's MBA program really helped me kicking off the stuff.
Yeah, UCLA has a really good program now. I don't know back in the day in 2014, 2013, how strong the program was, but now they have some really good leadership and translating technologies. I saw on LinkedIn that you actually dropped out of your MBA program. What happened there?
Yeah, actually, yeah. In the first year, I think almost everything has happened. And then I was doing 1 night flight, or 0 night flight, going to Japan from the midnight, leaving Los Angeles at the midnight, arriving Japan in the morning, doing pitches and grant applications, then getting back to the plane around midnight and coming back to the LA, then joining the class and the exams. That was my last minute.
That is crazy. And that's kudos to your commitment. Basically, you're in love with the technology. This is your first time. I know you were an investment banker. I'm sure your analysis was like a banker. What were you evaluating? What did you like about this technology when you decide that I'm going to pair up with Takahiro and work with him? And what were your apprehensions like? Were you worried that something won't work? And how did you come to a decision that I want to work with this startup because you don't have a biotech background? Tell me that story.
Yeah, basically it's completely based on my intuition. There is a one guy almost around the same age having strong aspiration, and he strongly believes in what he's doing, but he has apparent issue that he can't solve, but I may be able to solve for him. I just wanted to see how the technology could evolve with my help.
Yours is a very interesting case study. I'm going to double click on this subject because here we tell this fairy tale story about how scientists need to work with MBAs. And especially if the MBA student does not have a background in biology, how do they actually work together? And where does the conviction come from? I just am trying to understand your decision making process. Yes, you had a good heart. You met this guy, you want to help him. But you ever worried that it might fail, or did you walk in saying, I'm going to give myself 1 year or 2 year or 3 years? Walk me through the decision making process. Did you talk to your parents?
Basically, I wanted not the startup experience by joining already started companies, which was not really attractive to me. I wanted to know from zero how the technology could employ the business model, then blooming as a actual product. And I was just fine with any failures. I didn't really want success in a short period of time. Starting from zero apparently takes time, and that was just fine for my life. I thought like in my life, the money wouldn't be really big motivation for my life to work, but how attractive it is and how exciting it is would matter to me. So I just decided, yeah, it's cool. And this guy is also cool. Then why not just start helping him? On top of that, I had 2 years preparations for the technology. So somehow I could have time to prepare myself as well, be aware of the market and how I can be of the help and the personal relationship with him as well.
Right. Basically, you were creating the pitch decks and working at UCLA with your the MBA students. So that gave you a good understanding and appreciation. I think that was even before forming the company. You did not form the company yet. So I think that's a good takeaway from your experience here. You don't even have to have a company, just come together, explore, see if there's any meat in this, explore the market. And if you both believe in the idea, that's a good place to move forward. Great. Sorry for the side journey here. Let's go back to 2015. You said you're able to raise about $500,000 from grants, and you are also talking to some investors. What was the investor feedback like for you guys?
The accepted investor?
Rejected ones too. They have more stories there, I think. People who didn't invest,
Sure.
what kind of feedback did you get from them?
Basically, almost all the feedback was about continue the research in academic field for some years so that you may be able to get more
Data.
supported data.
Yeah.
Especially the lack of in vivo data was critical in convincing them. But there was an interesting grant system in Japan from the grant institution called NEDO, NEDO. They provide a program for the startup getting a letter of intent for the investment. The grant would match up to $500,000. So it was okay not getting the actual investment, or even it could be before company formation. As soon as we get the grant, we needed to form the company and get the investments, but we can rely on the grant for the decision. So the accepted venture capital said they can match up their funding as if we are accepted to the grant. The grant opened up the gate. We secured the grant. And then in the end of 2015, we decided to form the company in March next year and then got the investment and the grant.
Cool. And what was the initial team at that point? So you and Takahiro were the two team members and
one technician.
one technician there. Okay. And where were you located? Were you still at the university? And did you have to license the technology from the university? How did that work?
No, in the 2 years preparations, we worked with the law attorney at law for the patent, and he personally possessed the patent. We completed the negotiations with the university, so that was good. Possession of the patent was really appealing to the grant agency.
Okay, so the patent was filed through the university and you're able to license it from it?
No, actually, we negotiated. We filed it by ourselves.
Okay.
They agreed with not taking the right of the patent because he was a student. So like student application could be his individual finding with the university's approval or consent. And then we decided to file the patent by ourselves.
That is very interesting that the university would let you do that. It's a bit more complicated in the US. I think universities are a lot more stringent about them filing it and you have to license it. Very rarely in a case like this would they let the student go and file themselves. Yeah, I'm glad it all worked out. Talk about the chemistry between you and Takahiro at the initial days. You're working together for the first time almost in terms of building the company. Talk about the division of labor, any misunderstandings you had initially, and how did that chemistry evolve over the period of time?
Maybe the preparations for the pitch was where we understand each other. I was really detail oriented in the pitch and tried to make the business model really clear. But out of his expertise, he tried to understand what I am saying for the science as well. So it was really fun time discussing each other, understanding each expertise and the trust what the other guy is saying. So the pitch creation, business model creations were the bonding process actually.
It was basically about building trust, I think, which is very, very important in any business or relation, I think. You mentioned business plan, a business model. Talk about your assumptions about the markets at that point. What did you think the market was going to be, and has that changed or evolved, or your thought process has evolved over the years?
Yeah, so we really discussed how, as you said, there was a big discussion among us as well. So we discussed which indication we should target, first of all, and what business model we should explore. It could be the licensing out models or doing the clinical trial by ourselves, aiming for IPO or not. We agreed that autologous therapy for the heart could be something different from what existing right now. Because the therapy has been said that allogenic pipelines are more advantageous from the business point of view because we can manufacture the cells a lot and could be distributed with the existing business model which the pharmaceuticals have. But we noticed the significant difference of the immune rejections, organ to organ. Apparently, kidney and liver have less response from the immune system, whereas heart having the highest immune response, where no cell implantation could be successful without getting the immune suppressive medications.
Wow,
especially for the cardiomyocytes.
Interesting. I didn't know about this, about the heart cells and the immune response. Okay. Allogenic was not a way, so you had to go your own way.
we could be only feasible autologous option, we thought, because there's a ordinary biopsy technique from the heart, and the fibroblast is really proliferative cells. So only tiny fraction of the tissues that we can obtain from the biopsy, we thought it could be manufacturing feasible cells. We thought autologous and homologous, the heart-derived cells-based treatment is feasible.
That is fascinating. And what was your support system like at that point? Like, who else were you talking to? Who was giving you feedback about any of these processes that you're talking about in decision-making process? Who did you surround yourself with?
So I continued my relationship with the UCLA folks. In the program, I could work with one MD MBA professor, and he had a lot of insights how the biotechs should be started. And I also accessed a Stanford researcher who had the entrepreneurial experience in the past. And he was also a cardiac surgeon. So he knew what kind of injections or infusion system we should use and the current hurdles that the cell therapy companies are facing. Basically, without having really good advisors, we couldn't come up with the business ideas.
Yeah, super important to get out and talk to people who have seen things in the space. Let's shift gears and talk about your fundraising process. The first one looks like a grant of $500,000, and you've raised Series C recently. Talk about that journey and the lessons learned in that process.
The Japanese financing system for the biotech startups are completely different from the ones in the US. Apparently, the size of the investment is by far lower. So we really cut the milestones into really tiny ones. We do this tinier experiment, get the result, then we can progress into the next round, and then we maybe work on the manufacturing system, then go to the next round. So that's how we ask the venture capitals to take the risk, which is not really huge investment, though the Japanese venture capitals are relatively smaller than the US. So thinking of their funding size, the typical seed and early investment is going to be really smaller. We try to achieve each of the milestones at each of the stages, and that's how we could be successful in continuing the financing.
I saw the amount of money you raised was nothing crazy like what we get to raise here in the US. In terms of the milestones, are they any different from the milestones the folks here in the US are proposing? Have you seen the difference in the milestones? You said we have smaller milestones. What does that look when you compare that to biotech company startups in the US or other places?
I don't know a lot of cases in the US. In some successful startups, they could be in stealth mode, not publicly making announcements what they are doing. Instead, with the significant seed and Series A financing, they would see what promising clinical study data they could obtain. Preclinical study data would be the largest hurdle. Basically, Series A could be for early stage clinical trials. So then they could complete the preclinical study money in the early stage funding. Then they progress into the earlier clinical stage and getting the human data for the further fundraising. But typically speaking, the Japanese startups are doing multiple rounds in the preclinical studies, then rodent study, pig study, safety and toxic studies, the multiple milestones, even for the preclinical studies.
That's why. So it was interesting. I was looking at your fundraising history and they were happening in quick succession. In 1 to 2 years, you were raising Series A, B, and C. And I was wondering, but then amounts were much smaller, $12, $14 million. So that makes a lot of sense. I think in terms of risk for the venture capitalists too, it's a lot more meaningful risk and calculated risk. Instead of raising $100 or $200 million and then going for a long period of time, they're cutting down the risk there. Very, very interesting. And have you not approached investors outside the US? If you have, what is that experience like?
You mean outside of Japan, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It was a long journey for engaging the foreign investors. There's a lot of competition in the US, apparently. All the companies in the world coming to the US aiming for getting the
Yeah.
fundraising. And once we started our ecosystem in Japan, mixing the US, Japan, or European and Japan venture ecosystem, it's hard. Japan has its own original ways to support the startups, which is apparently different from the system the other countries have. So in some cases, I see companies try to do the inversion of the company.
Yeah.
Start the company with the Japanese seed RE money, then doing the inversion, getting the headquarter in the US, and do the later fundraising in the US. That's how not many, but really a few companies in Japan are getting the US funding.
So basically, they're all homegrown, tend to stay there, do not want to mix up with Europeans or the American startup ecosystem because the funding system is different. Yeah.
Time difference also matters and language matters. What language should we have the board meeting? And should we go to meet the investors physically? Should we go to the US for the board meeting alone? The logistics issue also arises.
Indeed. I had one other venture capitalist from Japan, from the University of Tokyo Edge Capital Partners, Casey Day. He talked a bit about some of the universities funding founders like yourself. I see in your history that you have a lot of money from universities coming in as venture capitalists. How are they different from the traditional venture capitalists? Are they a little bit easier?
I don't think so. I think the university-derived venture capitals has more PhD, more at least scientific backgrounds compared to the ordinary venture capitals.
Oh, okay.
But I don't see much of the difference right now, not anymore. Used to be the general venture capitals has more like business-minded person. They would look more deeply into the business model that these startups have. And sometimes they have biotech or deep tech investment arm plus SaaS internet investment arms. So the venture capitalist overlaps. But in the university-backed venture capitals, apparently the mission is to support the deep tech and biotech in Japan, supporting them to be a actual business. So there's apparent bias in the investment to the deep tech. But recently we got some other independent venture capitals focusing on the investment to the Japanese technologies. So the difference is a bit more big.
Very interesting. Yeah, maybe we can shift this gears and talk about some of your early challenges. What are some of the significant challenges you faced in the early stages of building Metcela?
It is good to have smaller milestones so that we can be focused on one thing, get the things done, then getting the next round of the investment. But sometimes we lose flexibility in how we develop the pipelines. And there's apparent time limitation, meaning the amount of the money in the banking account is our time limitation. We sometimes needed to undercut what we really need to do. In a research strategy, we needed to cut off some of the experiment and try to get the final result earlier and less amount of the money. So I wish if we could have a bit more timeline and money room, then we could have done a bit more preparations for the pipeline development, or we could aim the US clinical trials. That was the upper limitations for the Japanese startups. We need to focus on what we can do with the money, then the goal setting could be a bit lowered.
That must be difficult. You're trying to control time and cells, which might not be, if science does not go the way you plan most of the time, and you're trying to achieve your milestones. And if it is time bound, That's a hard place to be in. I'm glad you overcame those things. And one other point I wanted to ask was about cell therapy and manufacturing challenges. You're dealing with cells at the stage you are. Talk about what you have at this point in terms of infrastructure, the ecosystem that you have in Japan, and what could help.
It's a long story, but yeah, as you said, the cell manufacturing is still in the progression. No concrete standard for the
Mhm.
cell manufacturing, especially for the stem cells and cell therapies. So we have cell manufacturing research team, which is actually working on the process development from the scratch. So we have a partnership with some of the cell manufacturing equipment companies and see what equipment be suitable for the cell manufacturing, which is apart from the scientific research in
Yeah.
the pipeline development, but we dedicated the certain resource into the cell therapy manufacturing. I think it's not easy part of the business to be solved. And the reason why we actually acquired the pediatric heart failure company was due to the manufacturing challenges that they faced. And because we have dedicated process development team, they capitalized on our team and actually we could solve their issue at Metcela for the last 1.5 years, and we could continue the manufacturing for the pipeline.
Speaking of acquiring, what is that experience like? You're a startup here, and then you're trying to acquire other startups. Walk me through that story of how did the company approach you, or how did you approach them, and what was the decision-making process looking like?
So first of all, I was a banker, so I handled merger and acquisitions processes by myself. I knew what it is going to be and what the negotiation is going to be. We knew them because they are in a really similar field, autologous and homologous treatment for the heart failure. In a biotech conference in Japan, I met executive officer, interestingly, who was also from Morgan Stanley. I knew
Mhm.
him. We had a casual conversation how we can actually collaborate because the Japanese cell therapy industry is still really small. Startups can't survive without the collaborations. So he thinks the Japan Regenerative Medicine, the acquired company, and Metcela could have a lot of technological synergies. So we agreed to have a alliance in the first place and see if our process development team could help them solve the issue. That was winter in 2021. And we collaborated for some month, decided that we should acquire actually the asset so that we can have the pipeline on our hands. Our team could be more of the help by acquiring the asset. And the parent company agreed because they have the other pipelines to work and they also have the commercialized pipelines. So they also needed to spare the resource into the commercialized ones. In the spring next year, so I mean spring last year, we agreed to acquire the company. And at the same time, we did financing. The pipeline auditions, especially when the pipeline is in a phase 3 trial, the capital expenditure is huge. So we talked to the investors with the acquisition in mind and financed for both of the pipelines, existing ones and acquired ones.
Fascinating story. And how big was your team, Metcela's team at that point, and how big was the incoming team, the regenerative medicine company?
We had around 23 at the time of the acquisition. And then after acquisition, we also needed to hire the staff members, support members for the acquired pipeline. Now we have 38 members. So only within 1 year after the acquisition, the team became 1.5 times bigger.
Yeah, that's crazy. How was the integration of the two teams like? Any challenges in that?
Of course,
Talk us and how you're handling that, and you seem to be happy, so you managed it well.
yeah, we ended up having a really strong alliance. It was tough for the people overlapping the project.
Yeah.
They had dedicated project, had a focus, and then eventually told, from now on, you need to work on these two projects.
Yeah.
That was not an easy part. But also they noticed there's a lot of things that they can learn from each other. We only had phase one pipeline. We didn't know what the phase two, phase three is going to be, what conversation we may have with the Japanese agency, PMDA. On the other hand, the acquired company didn't have a lot of CMC development resources, and they were up only supported by our infrastructure, facility, and the people. So that respect really helped forming united team.
Is this the first time you're handling a team of about 40 people in your life?
Of course. It's my first time. That was my dream, by the way. I wanted to have the merger experience in my biotech business because there's so many tinier startups here. So I thought M&A should be done in the industry. So I thought this is clear strategy to survive, but it was my first time.
I'm smiling because I was working with a diagnostic startup a couple of years ago, and that is exactly what I wanted to go and acquire a bunch of other small diagnostic companies because I know they all are going to fail by themselves, and there's no way they can make money. But if we bring the technologies together, there could be a better chance of survival. The industry is hard to survive in, but earlier M&As might really help. I hope other founders are taking notes here. While we're on the subject of you evolving as a CEO of the company for about 40 people, talk about your evolution as a leader. You started with 2 people, and how did your thought process change? What are the lessons learned? Any mistakes made in this process that other CEOs could learn from?
CEOs are really feeling alone, not having anyone really close. We need to think by ourselves, and we need to be the best in the company for the ideas and for the strategy. That pressure really stressed us, the management team. And we had really hard time, not successful in the financing. All the stress overwhelmed us. But again, the existence of the advisors, amazing advisors, helped us a lot. Caleb was also long-standing advisor to us. He's amazing motivational speaker. He encouraged me a lot. And there's the other guy in California. His name is Devon. He is also motivational, and he tried to connect me with the guys he know, either in Japan and the US. My takeaway here would be talking to the people. We are not alone. Advisors and the new connections really helped me opening up the next step. One example would be our catheter development. We have proprietary catheter cell delivery system, which could be connected with the 3D mapping system, which enables us to see the heart and infarction situation in a real-time basis in a 3D manner. And then the physicians can decide where to inject the cells really precisely based on the mapping. We got the introduction to the catheter company, and that was really good time. We had hard time deciding the cell injections, and as I told you, it is really hard to attach the cells to the heart because of the immune system and the blood flow. If we inject the cell from the coronary artery, the cells will go away with the blood flow. There needs to be really revolutionize the new ways to inject the cells. So that eventually satisfied the milestone that we had. The new connections, the collaborations always saved me.
Great. I'm glad you have a support system. Caleb is really phenomenal. I'm glad you have his support. Talk about hiring process. It's a big team now. Did you have a process for hiring people and retaining them? If there are any lessons learned in that process?
Not really special about the hiring, but we have tight cooperation with the hiring agencies where they spontaneously propose individuals may have fit with us. They know our company well. So even out of the position posts, they spontaneously propose. That was actually really helpful. The good individuals are not in the market whenever we need them. We really need to catch whether we have in active recruitment mode or not. I think we formed a team based on the supply, I think, not the demand from us, but looking at the market all the time. And whenever really good individuals coming out to the market, and we tried to get them.
So you do have a system or a company or a firm that actually helps you find people, but you're always recruiting. If there is somebody on the market, you just pick them. If there was somebody not on the market, did you ever approach somebody and did you succeed? How did that work out?
Not really. We tried to hire pharmaceutical background people, basically. In many times, it is different for the basic researchers.
Yeah.
But for the CMC development, regulatory, and clinical developments, we needed to hire the people from the pharmaceutical companies. For that, we needed the agency's help, and they always watch the market. And sometimes we have early retirement program from the company. Some professionals apply to the early retirement and then think of coming to startup to nurture the young professionals. And that actually helps to get the pharmaceutical background people.
Right. Certain areas need experienced people and they are available in the pharma industry. I'm assuming you have access to them. I think we are coming to a close to our podcast. One question I try to ask my guests is about culture. What would you say the culture at Metcela is? Like, how did you build it? Any lessons learned from that process?
It's really interesting mixture of the people. As I said, there's pharmaceutical background people for the business, but we also have decent basic research team. Many of them are from academic experience. The company has really academic culture in some part and pharmaceutical and business culture in some part. They all respect each other. So that's quite interesting ecosystem I can see. That is, I think, one of the Metcela's culture strength. And the age is relatively younger than the other Japanese biotechs, typical Japanese biotechs, which is around 38, 39. So we have the researchers in 20s to the ex-pharma professionals in the 60s. And we have mentoring system in the company. The experienced people have a chance to mentor the younger professionals. And that was one of the motivation come to the startups. They hope to help the younger generations. And for the younger people, they get the chance to know what the pharmaceutical industry is and what needs to be done to make the technology into the business. So I think the mentoring system is connecting the people and nurturing the respect among the company. I try to make the company really flat. Some of the people know that the Japanese working environment sometimes really hierarchy, sometimes hinders increasing the productivity. So we try to make the system really flat so that they can openly discuss and come up with the new ideas and easily propose them.
That must be very welcoming because all the stories we hear about Japan and corporations is the hierarchical system and the challenges that come with it. Is that something you made intentionally from the beginning, or did you realize halfway through that we need to have a flatter structure?
I also had a hesitation here. Being a startup, reflecting the CEO's or founder's idea is also really important. Then we can easily lose our focus in what we do. So balancing the spontaneous intentions and autonomy among the employees and the CEO's vision and implementation of our vision was really tough. For that, I intentionally tried to balance them. I tried to respect what the employees are saying. And sometimes I really needed to force them to follow my strategy, but we respect the discussion a lot. We don't decide alone. We mandate the discussion for the decisions. That's how I think the flat culture could be implemented.
Discussions are very important. I was listening to Jeff Bezos talk about how he decides, he encourages discussions, and sometimes he differs, but then decides to go with the rest of the company. Are there any decisions that you did something like that where you did not really agree with what the team is proposing, but then you decide to go ahead and do it anyways? Were there any that stand out?
Sometimes I really need to decide, especially when the team has separated opinions and some folks say for this and the other folks say for this. And I am in the position to decide which way we should go forward. But even in that situation, discussion helps because they understand why the other ways are meaningful. And once decided, they can follow what has been proposed based on the learnings they could have in the discussion. But in many cases, the discussion actually navigates the people toward one united decision. This is not the battle of the people. Like, this is how we come up with the better idea. Like, we start from the earlier decisions with the less information, but once they discuss, they bring up their own perspectives and learn from each other, then like propose the new ideas and come up with good ones. Okay, this might be the best idea, incorporating all the ideas. That discussion system and the people with the facilitation skills are helping us to come up with that right destination. The discussion is going to be the map to navigate us.
Phenomenal. I think just being a CEO is tough. At some point, you have to make a decision and it's on your head, whatever the outcome may be. But because you're frustrating, I think people will be more understanding rather than a hegemony, a single leader is making decision. What challenges do you see as you scale the company in the near future? And if there are any specific asks from the audience on this podcast, I'd love to hear.
The talent acquisition in the finance is always a matter with the startups. I think all the biotech or all the startups are always having this as a challenge. For the finance, we are happily having a hard time. The market is not good. Maybe the NASDAQ and maybe the Dow are in the highest range ever, but the money is not flowing into the biotech sector in Japan as well. We're getting historically lowest price in the biotech public companies. So we wish that the investors and even the society be aware of the importance of supporting earlier researchers and earlier technologies so that the new technologies could save more lives. Also, for the government system in Japan having really difficult issues to solve, we have aging society. The financial burden to the society for the medical insurance system is huge. The government really tries to reduce the budget by paying less to the pharmaceuticals, and pharmaceutical is in the trouble getting enough revenue from the Japanese market, and then they suppress the investment to the newer drugs. Or sometimes the foreign pharmaceuticals keep Japanese market, like they don't do the clinical trials. So some issues in Japan also needs to be fixed to help startups to grow and pharmaceuticals to help the startups. And finally, we really hope to bridge the gap between Japan and the US. And now that we are initiating the phase 3 trial, we think it is a time to go global. We have employees not speaking Japanese, some of the employees from Sweden, France, and the US. So ultimately, we are aiming for the global team. So anybody listening to this podcast interested in the fibroblast technology, cardiac stem cell technology, and having the entrepreneurial mindset, please hit me up and let's discuss what Metcela can do in the US market and what opportunity we can offer to you.
All the challenges you mentioned are real, and I will make sure we amplify your message and reach to talent here. We got plenty of it in the Bay Area, in the Boston, in the audience. There's plenty of biotech folks. Hopefully, we'll get some of them to you. All right, let's come to my traditional closing questions. If there is one mistake you would avoid in your journey that others can learn from, what would that be as you build the company?
I don't know if this is really a mistake or not, but I'm always wondering if I were starting the startup in the US instead of starting it in Japan. There's a huge difference between these markets. I think I could have started the company in the US and forming the team in the US. In the earlier days, Japan was really beneficial. There's less competition. As I said, in the US, all the people in the world are coming to the market and seeking the fundraising money. But in Japan, almost all the monies are going into the Japanese startups. So we compete against the Japanese rivals. It is good, but with that strategy, we can avoid the global competition. So, and competition actually helps the companies to grow. Yeah, I'm always wondering, what if we start in the US and what it is like to be a US startup? So I don't regret. I don't think it's a failure. I am thinking we are trying to have the Japanese ecosystem. And I think the Japan is also changing or have already changed a lot for the last 7-8 years. And government started the huge grant given to the startups. $2 billion will be given as a grant for the startups from this year. That change will help the startups in Japan. But again, I'm always thinking, what will it going to be in the US?
Yeah, that is a very deep and thought-provoking question for people. I see the benefits of building a company here in the US, but then the competition for those dollars is crazy. The good thing I think I see in Japanese startup in Metcela in this case was how we can actually design smaller milestones, which is much more meaningful. It's easy to get lost, and that focus really helps. If you can back the founders with the right kind of money there, they realize that they need a little more time, a little more money. If they come in, if they go in the right direction, I think that's a great model to actually follow for other countries. That's $1 million question, but time will tell. My second closing question is, if you want to acknowledge one or two or more people who played a significant role in success building Metcela so far.
There's so many people helped us in the past supporting company creation and business advisory. But basically, the grant agency actually helped the Japanese NEDO was all the full of the aspirational people, and they helped us forming the company. And Beyond Next Ventures, they other venture capital supported us in a really fast day. And they are also the startup. They started the venture capital in 2014. Yeah, it was really new, and we were in the first batch of their investment. So that was really collaborative investment, I think. As I mentioned, all the advisors in California, Caleb, Devon, and Fumi Ikeno sensei, and Phil Yan at Stanford, all these advisors really helped us when we got lost and we don't know what to do. For some of the failures, they navigated us. And the Japanese ecosystem, all current investors are always helpful. They have strong mindset all the time. Founders and CEOs sometimes really damaged. For some failures, we could be easily damaged and I'm not in the mood of doing anything, that kind of situation. But with all the help, I think I could gain my mindset and tackle the tough situations again. So I'm really thankful to the investors as well.
Are you married and have family? If you don't mind asking, I'm trying to understand the support you might be getting from family system there.
I actually recently married. The life has been changed a lot since then. I got first kid this year,
Wow,
this
congratulations.
June. Thank you. I honestly think it would be impossible having the marriage or kid in the earlier startup days. Everything was about my startup. 100% of my time devoted to the startup and then my company. And then I didn't have any time for my family and kids. But as company has grown, I got members I can rely on. Then I could have some space in my mind and in my time could be spent for the family. And they're really supporting me a lot. Mentally, the kid is amazing. I got the other motivation. The startup is how I contributed to the society. I try to make the society better, basically, but my kid is making it more real. The society he will live after my life. So I got real motivation now, and I'm really thankful about that.
Great. Yeah, I intentionally asked this question because families play such a big role, especially if you're married. They become your co-founder somehow. They'll get to listen to all your troubles, and kids uplifting. They are a lot of work. I have two little kids too, but congratulations on all those fronts. Ken, it was a very learning experience for me. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Wish you and the team of Metcela lots of success and good luck with everything.
Thank you again for this amazing opportunity to talk to you. I'm really honored to be here. And I also learned a lot by digesting myself, what I did in the past, what learnings I got. And I think I could be ready for the next challenges in the company. So thank you again and hope this podcast could a bit of the help to the audience.
Excellent. I will try and bring you back when you have a big exit. I think we want to hear the rest of the story as well. This is just the beginning. I wish you good luck,
Sure.
man.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lab to Startup podcast. You can find links to the resources and programs mentioned in these episodes, connect with Naresh, or subscribe to this show at labtostartup.com.